All right. As funky as this will be, I'd ask you, if you're not speaking, if you turn off your microphone, keep it quiet in here.
Sure.
I will show everybody online that there are, let's see, at least 20 people online. How many you got there? Here's our R.I.T. folks here tonight. Welcome, everybody. I think we got at least 25 people here at my last count. So welcome to our first in-person meeting at R.I.T. in a long, long time. So glad you guys are all here. I'm far enough away from you, so I won't wear a mask till I go to sit down, so you guys can see what I'm saying or hear me better. The other thing I didn't learn how to do yet is turn on the microphone, so I'll try to speak loudly, and I know Dr. Richmond will speak loudly when he's up here, so we shouldn't have a problem speaking. Everybody can hear me okay? Yeah. Awesome. All right, and folks online, you can see the presentation okay? Thumbs up. Excellent. So welcome to the September monthly meeting, everyone. My name is Mark Vinerich, your president. If you don't know me, this is kind of the oddest meeting I've ever hosted. So thank you for coming, virtually and otherwise. So here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to do a welcome, which I've just started. We have a bunch of announcements, a lot of announcements actually. We're going to be celebrating 30 years of the Farash Center, and I'll bring Carol on, who's our historian, and we actually have members that haven't been with us, haven't been at our meetings since actually last time Rick was here was a virtual meeting sometime last year, I think. But Rick Albrecht, from one of the guys that helped found the Farash Foundation, the Farash Center, not the Farash Foundation, the Farash Center, and construction and all that. You'll see a little bit more about that later, is with us tonight. And then we got a talk by Dr. Michael Richmond right here at R.I.T., professor in the School of Physics and Astronomy, College of Science, and actually the first grad student of our last speaker, Alex Filipenko, believe it or not. And he's going to talk about the Mars Perseverance Rover, what's going on Mars tonight. All right, so is there anybody that's new, or this is the first time they've been to an astronomy section meeting? Yes, what's your name?
My name is Matt. I'm Dave at L3 Harris.
Oh, okay. Dave dragged you from work and brought you down here to visit with us.
Yes.
Well, welcome. Glad you could make it tonight. Anybody else first time here? No. Okay. How about online? Nobody. It looks like usual suspects here online. All right. So has anybody done any observing they want to share with us of late, online or otherwise? I'll break the ice. I was out at the site on Tuesday. It looked like through clear sky clock and through atmospheric that the skies were going to be absolutely gorgeous until about 1 a.m. And I said, I'm going to go out to the site and mess around with that C14 up there and do a little imaging, see if I can get some wide stuff that I could capture in a wide field. Since it's in the hyperstar mode, it's got a fairly wide field at f1.9. And so I went out there, and a few people joined me. Dave Mock joined me. He's a new member. Who else was out there? There was like three or four people out there. Anyway, I got set up. I started futzing around with some stuff in there and messing around with getting things set up because it wasn't quite dark yet. Mark Dudley was there with me as well. And we got to be about 9 o'clock. I started doing some imaging, and I got some images up at in the northeastern sky near Pegasus of a galaxy called NGC 7331. Very pretty galaxy. But the reason I picked that area is because I know that around that galaxy are a lot of other galaxies. And I sent that image out to the club earlier this week. And it's a little, I can work on the color on that a little bit, but it was a quick and dirty capture and processing. So that was kind of a fun thing to see image, was that section of the sky that had a lot of galaxies. Anybody do any other observing? The planets have been nice. No? Dave? Dave looked at the sun with Bob McGovern. That's right. You guys were up at the site earlier, like yesterday or today. Yeah, it was a very blue sky. It was a beautiful blue sky, yes, and clear. Yeah, it was. And that sunspots are going nuts right now. Yeah, we were watching. Love it, love it. Did you have your scope out there set up or no? We're gonna try it. You're gonna try it? Okay. We're gonna try it in the solar room. Okay. That's right. You got a monster lump, don't you?
We're not sure yet.
Okay, we're gonna try to put Dave's scope. What is that, a 130? What is that? 155. I'm sorry, I underestimated that. That's a nice size scope.
A couple of months ago, I captured a video of the International Space Station transit across the sun.
You captured a video of the international I'm saying it for these guys so they can't hear you.
Yeah.
Captured a video of the International Space Center
Yeah,
transiting the
ISS.
sun.
Yeah, across the sun. There's a website that will calculate where you need to be when.
Yeah.
And I went down to Powder Mill Park, set up, and a lot of futzing.
Yeah.
And 2 seconds.
Two seconds,
No, less than a
less than
second.
2 seconds.
I got 15 frames.
15 frames, that's it.
Yeah.
You knew you had to do a video to do that. to catch it.
That's the only way you do it is fast video, really, yeah.
It's pretty cool.
That's cool. That's cool. So you got the silhouette of the
Exactly.
space station crossing
Yeah,
the
it
sun.
looks like a TIE fighter. It wasn't particularly
Yeah.
sharp.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right. Anybody else with the observing stories? All right. So we had an open house on the 4th and 5th. I think we had a work party on the 4th, an open house on the 5th. I know a lot of work got done up there between those 2 days. Some buildings got painted. There was mowing, weeding, all kinds of other stuff. And I just wanted to say thank you to the people who have been doing that. And there's been folks that have been very regular all summer long. Leo, I shouldn't say all the names because I'm going to forget some of the people that are really doing it. And I want to recognize those guys that are really, and gals that are doing a lot of work on the site. The site looks phenomenal. If you go up there at any point right now, take a look at the site and like go up there to observe. It's in really, really nice shape. So thanks to everyone who's worked on the site.
How'd you get the photograph?
That photograph, that's actually taken by a drone. It was taken a few years ago.
The drone.
Yeah. So I must say thank you to Bob Easterly. Bob Easterly has been a member a long, long time, but he's been treasurer of the astronomy section for 22 years. And we owe him a huge debt of thanks for his years of service. It's a pretty important job, keeping the books of the astronomy section, keeping our investments straight, coming to virtually every board meeting in 22 years, or pretty much every board meeting in 22 years. And Bob's going to be stepping down at the end of this year. He announced his retirement in June, and I sent a note out to everybody letting them know that. But I think it's important that I recognize Bob at this meeting, that after 22 years, he's stepping down. Just a fantastic job. Let's give Bob a round of applause. Very good. Thank you, Bob. Really do appreciate that. It's a thankless job. So that brings up the next subject. I have the classified ads, the Astronomer's Chronicle, all the news that's fit for stargazers. We do have some job openings now at the astronomy section. One of them is for secretary. We're looking for someone to fill the role of a secretary at our board meetings. We meet once a month to record the notes, the minutes of what goes on. If you're interested or you feel qualified, let me know. And we'll set up some time to talk with the board of directors to see if you can, if you're ready for that role. Be glad to take anybody that's interested to talk to for that role. And then we need to fill the treasurer role. So this is a pretty important role. This is not a role that you would handle for just a single year. We're looking for someone that would do this for a few years, not 22 years. Thank you, Bob. But certainly more than a year, maybe looking at 2, 3, 4 years. If you feel you have the qualifications to be treasurer, see me or any other board member. Let us know you're interested, and we'd like to bring you into the board. Just talk a little bit about how you think you're qualified, and what the responsibilities are. If you have questions on that, because we really do need to replace Bob after 22 years, and we need that with a person that's very qualified to do that. And the sooner you step forward, the sooner we can get you together with Bob to figure out, what he's doing, how he's doing things, and we can make a nice smooth transition from that role into a new person. Questions on that by anybody? Anytime, give me a call. My email is pretty available to anybody. You can call me as well. Glad to talk to anybody about the availability of that job. So thank you.
Hey, Mark. Those of us on the Zoom are not seeing your slides.
You're not?
No.
Sorry. How's that?
That's better.
And now I can't move my slides. Hang on.
That says classified ad, now it's gone, okay. Is that what you're showing, classified ads?
Yeah, hang on, I gotta do this differently. Were you guys able to see this stuff before?
No. Uh-uh.
Weren't seeing the slideshows before? Okay. Are you seeing it now?
Before you left and came back, we could, Mark. But since you started the meeting formally, this is the first we've seen of them.
But you were doing such a good job covering it verbally, we were okay. We didn't see the one picture you described though.
That's odd. I cannot see my PowerPoint presentation. Hang on. See it up here, but I have no way to scroll through it. So if I click on it, there we go. I'll click on it this way. All right, so upcoming events, we have our board meeting is coming up next week on Wednesday. We're going to meet at the Farash Center. We're also going to be remote, much like we are tonight. We're going to try a different tool for that. But if you're interested in coming to the board meeting, let me know and I will get you an invite if you want to do it remotely, or you can come to the Farash Center. It'll start at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. Typically, we're about 2 hours. And we're trying to keep it to 2 hours so we're not infringing on your evening more than that. And then we have an open house next weekend, not this weekend, next weekend. And it's also the Ionia Fall Festival. So there's a lot of activity going on in the town of Ionia. There is a tractor parade that goes through town. There's a carnival site behind the Methodist Church. We will actually have a booth there manned by Vicky Rotolo, who's waving her hand wildly if you can see her in this room. Vicky will be there. I'll help her getting set up to man our booth from about 11 to 4 p.m. I think is when it's manned. Here's the rest of the events of the day at the Fall Festival. The tractor parade is at 1 o'clock. But if you're a hearty soul and you want to get there early in the morning, there's donuts from 7:30 to 9:30. That's really for people who are setting up, and we'll be setting up our booth in the morning. I'll meet Vicky there probably about 10:30. Maybe we'll stop and get coffee and donuts, Vic.
No, I'll go early.
All right, we'll connect on what time we're going to show up.
9 a.m.,
What's that?
9-ish.
9-ish? All right, it's a date. I got a date with Vicky at 9. If you want to join us for coffee and donuts. There'll be a chow hut to get food all day long between 10 and 4:30. There's a chicken barbecue going on until it's sold out, then it's all gone. And then there'll be a cake wheel and coin toss. So the cake wheel, you could put, I think you put 50 cents down. You can win some really nice cakes, cupcakes, food, pies, all that stuff. And then the coin toss has all kinds of little knickknacks that you could throw coins. If you land in a dish, you can win certain stuff. It's a lot of fun. It's a very, very informal, type of carnival. But all day long from 11 o'clock or 10:30 or so until 4, we'll have hay rides from the site all the way up to the Farash Center, giving tours. Glad to have people join us at the site to help give those tours or just hang out, have a good time. David? Awesome, thank you. So David will be up there to help with tours. I'll be around as well. Glad to have anybody else to help join us. It's a fun time at the Fall Festival. The tractor parade is amazing because there are tractors. I think the earliest tractor I saw was from 1911. And they have tractors from the 20s, 30s, 40s, a lot of 40s, 30s, 40s tractors, all the way up to the current time. The Boy Scouts march, the fire department trucks roll through. It's a lot of fun for the tractor parade. Next week. All right, upcoming next month's meeting, October, is October 8th, not the 1st, October 8th. The 1st, there's a Black Forest Star Party that weekend, so we're gonna defer it to the following week. So October 8th is our next meeting. in this room and virtually. Well, the speakers are TBA, are to be announced. David?
We have a speaker lined up.
David says we have a speaker lined up. Who is?
I lined her up for October 1st. Alice Quillen
Oh, Alice Quillen. Yeah, see if she can do the 8th.
in mask.
All right. Sorry about that, Dave. So hopefully we'll have Alice Quillen on, no, excuse me, October 8th. We haven't had Alice speak for us in a long time, so we're looking forward to that. All right, the following day we'll have an open house and observing the same day to accommodate those who like to watch those Buffalo Bills play on Sunday. So we will do that on both on Saturday. There'll be an open house in the morning. If it's clear, some people will stay all the way into the observing session, but the observing session will start at dusk, which is about 7:30 or so until whenever, depending on how clear it is. So that's member observing on the 9th. And then the following months, that October board meeting is on the 13th. And we'll be finalizing our board for elections for, actually, we'll be doing that very shortly. We'll be doing that very shortly. So by then we should know it. And again, astronomy section members are welcome to attend that as well. So I put this map up here. You guys found the best parking lot, right? Parking lot F. You're going to come here. It's not as convenient as it once was because now there's a bus terminal kind of where the closest parking was. But it's still a lot closer than it was over at Gosnell Hall. All right, so the Farash Center protocols, very slight changes to this. If you're going to the Farash Center, it's available for anybody to use and all vaccination status, but we ask that you sign in upon arrival, especially when there's a group of us at the Farash Center, so we can do contact tracing if something happens. Masking indoors is strongly encouraged. It really makes a lot of sense to wear a mask indoors. If you don't know the vaccination status of the people near you, it's probably a good idea to wear a mask indoors. If you're less than 6 feet apart, unvaccinated people must wear masks. No question about it if you're not vaccinated. The bathrooms are available for use. Just wash and sanitize your hands and the surfaces that you touch in there. And then dispose of wipes in the garbage can if you're using wipes. That we have a septic system that really isn't very kind to our septic system. So please use that. Questions on the Farash Center COVID protocols? A code to get in?
We need a code to get in. Is it locked?
The door is locked. If you're a key holder, you can get in. If you want to go and you don't have access, a key,
Yeah.
you can, if you're part of the email reflector,
Yeah.
mention that you want to go, see if you can find a key holder to come with you. I'm sure there's somebody that will join you to go in, to get in. Yeah. All right, so MEES actually did tours this year. We did not do tours in 2020, and a lot of astronomy section members helped out with this. There's a lot different way that we did MEES, and Carol Latta led us in this new adventure of doing MEES tours. So thank you, Carol, for all the work, as well as Dan Watson and Kelly Douglas at the U of R. So we were able to do 14 virtual tours, including 11 of us here at the astronomy section doing these tours. Some of us were doing the tours themselves, and talking to guests, and some of us were actually controlling the MEES telescope virtually from our home computers, literally sitting at our desk, opening up the dome, pointing it to the sky, turning it to different targets, and then imaging targets. And we actually were able to image in about 50% of those tours. And the tours that we were clouded out, we actually kind of simulated imaging. We kind of moved the scope around to where it would be pointed, and then pulled up images that were done earlier, like the last tour or whatever, that and showing how the images work. It was kind of cool to see how that we could control all this virtually. We didn't get quite as many guests as we did. We certainly had less tours than we had in years past. In fact, last year or 2 years ago, I think we had more guests than we've ever had in the past. And this year we had about 120 guests that virtually made their way up Gannett Hill to hear and see astronomy of the highest order. So I think the people that did it, without a doubt, had a good time, regardless of not being there. I'm sure we all wanted to be at the at MEES because it's kind of a cool tour. But here's those people that were there last year. I just want to say thank you to everybody that that helped out with those tours. It was actually a lot of fun to do them even virtually for the last year. So, and Carol, thank you for pulling it all together. You've done an incredible job with pulling that whole thing together. It had to be.
I just stand back and take the credit. You guys do all the work.
Yeah, you set the stage, so thank you. All right, ASRAS is in. And if you look all the way in the back corner of the room, you'll see Tony Gollenbeck waving his hand at you wildly. And he has your gear, if you haven't picked it up yet, in those boxes back there. Sorry, you virtual folks, you got to show up to get your gear. So if you plan to come to a meeting and you're waiting for gear, see Tony. He's usually at these meetings, so he's got it in the back room there. So if we decide to take a break here, or if we at the end of the meeting come see Tony, and he's got your stuff. Wearing his astronomy section gear right now. Nice, looks great. All right, I have something new to announce. You guys don't know this, except a handful of people know this, but Heroes Brewing Company is a brewing company that just took over about a year and a half ago, or maybe a little over a year ago, the old Lost Borough Brewing over on Atlantic Avenue. And they have a different mission than a lot of brewers, in that they like to celebrate the unsung heroes of the community. And their motto is, heroes don't look like they used to, they look like you do. And so what they do is, for each craft beer that they can, they donate 25 cents a can towards one nonprofit or another. And Greg Fagan, who's one of the owners of Heroes Brewing, contacted me a couple months ago and said, we'd like to do a beer for the astronomy section. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. I know a lot of beer lovers in the astronomy section. You know who you are. I think most people in the astronomy section like beer. And so they came up with, in the vats, as we were talking through this, was a milkshake IPA that they decided to call Nebula Milkshake IPA. And this is the label that'll be on the can. It is unique because all of their labels until now were actually white. And so we got the black Starfield label for our Nebula IPA, and there's always a heart image on it too. So I thought they did a pretty good job of doing this. Now, I don't know the release date yet. As soon as I know, I will let you guys know. And so a craft brew like this isn't going to be sold in Wegmans or Tops or anywhere else. They're going to sell it there. So if you want it, you're going to have to go there, or we'll have to make arrangements to buy a case or two. And maybe if you wanted to purchase it, we could split the cost, share the cost if somebody wanted to buy it that way. But I put their hours are there. They're open Wednesday through Sunday in the late afternoon, evening, if you're interested in frequenting Heroes Brewing. So really happy to see that. And I had it set up so I could actually read the what they wrote on it. Hang on, let me see if I can do this. I messed it all up, didn't I? Well, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's too difficult to pull up another screen to read it. But it has a nice little description of who we are, laying underneath the stars, looking at the heavens. And it describes some of the outreach stuff we do, and it thanks us for that. And the only difference between this and the next one will be that the actual label it'll have our web address on there, so people can check us out. You want to read it out loud? All right. Yes. Oh, I don't know. Oh, yeah, it's in the email. Yeah. You can zoom right in and read it, Vic. You want to come up here and read it? All right, or whatever. That's fine.
Lying on our backs, gazing into a starlit sky fills us with wonder. The astronomy section of Rochester Academy of Science is a diverse group that includes people of all levels of interest, experience, and a love for astronomy and space science. Some, although well-versed and experienced, are still amateur astronomers. Others, with little or no expertise, more than make up for that with their enthusiasm and willingness to learn. If you're interested in any aspect of amateur astronomy, why not join them? They can help you learn your way around the sky and fascinating science behind the hobby. And you'll have fun while doing it. We are proud to donate a portion of the proceeds from the sale of this can to ASRAS so they can continue to educate and fascinate stargazers of all ages.
Kinda cool.
Rose Nation.
And it should be available. I'm sorry if you are online, you probably didn't hear that, but I'll send the text out with the recording of this meeting. So, yeah, and I'll let you know when it's available. So that's kind of a cool thing. We're not gonna make a fortune on this. But I think it's kind of cool, a cool way to get us a little publicity. It's nice that we're being recognized, and maybe we get some more, what is a beer lover called? There's a name for it. It's a Cerevisophile is a word I looked at today. Cerevisophile. All right. So take two. The Blackfriars is again got the Silent Sky is going to be released. We were going to do this in the end of March, early April last year, and all of a sudden, all reality changed for everybody, and so it got canceled. But Silent Sky is a play done by Blackfriars. It describes the quote unquote computers, the female computers at Harvard University, led by Henrietta Leavitt, describes their stories of how they mapped stars and galaxies. Henrietta Leavitt is really responsible for a lot of important discoveries in astronomy. And this tells some of that story of the difficulties and the challenges and the rewards that came of that group of women. Member images will be part of that set. I think we contacted some of you in the past on that. If you're interested in sharing your member images, mostly wide field images, contact me. I'll put you in touch with them, and we'll let you know how we can do that, whether they're projected or what on their sets. But they're looking for that kind of stuff to be part of the set of Silent Sky. I scheduled an observing session for the cast and crew. That's actually going to happen on October 2nd and the 16th. 2 different nights of observing. One is, just in case we don't get observing on the other. I'll be hosting those, but I'm glad to have any help that you guys want to provide. Anybody else wants to help me help them do some observing on October 2nd and 16th. And then we will have I didn't have time to put this in there, but I found out today that we will have discounted tickets for any show that you want to see, but we will actually have reserved seats for the November 16th show. It's a Saturday afternoon, November 13th, excuse me. Thanks, Lori. Thanks for the point. The November 13th show is a Saturday afternoon, 2:00. It's the matinee on Saturday. If you want to see Silent Sky, we'll all have seats kind of together. I'm not sure exactly how they're distancing people in there or what, but the astronomy section will have seats for that show. And if you're interested, I'll have more information coming via email on that, but I want to make sure you saw that tonight. Pretty excited to see this after a year and a half. I was excited to see it when it was originally announced, but looking forward to that coming up very soon. All right, so celebrating 30 years. I got to figure out how I can get sound on here so that I can have Carol talk to this.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear Carol? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Carol.
Hey, perfect. So hi, everybody. You may recall that we were very hopeful that this year's Rochester Star Fest was going to be a formal celebration of 30 years of Farash Center. And in fact, we hoped that last year too, but didn't work out either time. But that doesn't matter because we're going to do it right now. And I want to especially notice that on this Zoom call, we have Rick Albrecht and Pat Cosgrove, who are 2 of the people who were instrumental in the start of the Farash Center. So thank you guys. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for everything you did. If you look at the pictures there across the top of the screen, you can see this remarkable transformation between 1988, when it was a big field with a lot of trees around the outside and a meadow in the middle. And then if you jump ahead to 1991, you see that some buildings have appeared. Not much, actually a building and a couple of domes. It still looked pretty barren. And then if you jump all the way ahead 30 years and look at the picture, you see that the most remarkable growth has taken place. And that has happened stick by stick and building by building and bit by bit. So there's a lot of people that were accountable and responsible for that happening. And we most of all, as a first step, need to thank the Marion and Max Farash and Molly and Louis Wolk for their financial contributions over the years, again and again and again. They gave us the land, they got us started with the initial building, and they have contributed ongoing. Their foundations have. None of those folks are with us anymore, but their foundations still remember us and do wonderful things for us. So if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, that worked.
Not yet.
Hold on.
Okay.
Okay.
So here are there was a cast of people. I did some research. This is part of the history project that a number of us started a while ago, and it became apparent that this momentous occasion was happening. If you go back into the old newsletters and do a little digging and then ask around, you find out that of the members of the club at that time, the people that are shown here, and these are all fairly current pictures, although several are now deceased, as you probably can guess. But lots of them are not. Lots of them are with us still, and that's what they look like today, or at least fairly recently. So there was Al Yearleys. There is Al Yearleys, who continues to be our wonderful supporter and benefactor and encouraging all the growth at Farash Center. Rick Albrecht, who's on this call. Ken and Trudy Brown, I know you all know those names. The Brown Library is part of their legacy to us. Chuck Spoolhoff, we just heard his talk last month. Mike Myers, he's still an active member. Pat Cosgrove, hi Pat. Tom Day, Matt Sinicola, and Glenn Cummings. And then there's three folks at the bottom I wasn't able to get pictures for. Clark Lewis, who was president way back when things started. Blair Pugh and Mark Torrance. So you'll see in the videos that we're going to be showing shortly all the things that happened to get us from where we were in 1988 to where we are in 2021. But there were the contributions of these folks were the biggest step. Like it's in any project, the ones who have the energy to get things rolling have a huge task, much bigger than those of us who carry it forward after that. So there are two videos we're going to be showing. The one is Rick Albrecht has put together for us because he was very much a part of those early years and has given us a video that describes some of what went on and how they made those first steps. And then the second video picks up where Rick left off and describes all the things that happened up till pretty much very recently. So the one other thing I want to make sure I say is this. If you think about all the development that's occurred in the last 30 years, and you were to name one name who was most responsible, who had the energy and the vision and the drive to accomplish lots of the things that have been accomplished, you would have to say that Bob McGovern is that person. So I don't think he's on the call tonight, but we all recognize his contributions in many, many ways. All right, so Mark, if you will start the first video, that would be great. Or not.
Hang on. I gotta make sure I'm sharing the sound.
Greetings. I'm Rick Albrecht. I joined the astronomy section back in 1969. And at the time, it was an active group, very supportive of beginners like myself. But there was no observing site like the clubs in Buffalo and Syracuse had. Over the years, this kind of fostered a pent-up demand for some kind of site. And in 1988, the University of Rochester offered to give us a 12-inch Tinsley telescope. At the time, Clark Lewis was our president, and he was key in the negotiations over that gift. Now, we had, our annual budget at that point was like $100 a year, a little over $100 a year. All of our assets could fit in a cabinet in the basement of the planetarium. So this was going to be a big change. And fortunately, we had a lot of enthusiasm. We formed a planning committee with a number of subcommittees to address various aspects of what would have to take place. And really, this gift of the Tinsley telescope was the first of 5 important gifts that made Ionia come about. And what I'd like to do is take a few minutes and share some photos of those early development events out at the Ionia site. The first of the 5 important gifts was the 12-inch Tinsley that came from the University of Rochester. We bolted it to my 16-inch to get an idea what the image looked like. Now, Al Ureli's was very important in getting the next important gift. He talked with Max Farash on the left and talked him into donating a plot of land out in Ionia. Blair Pugh took me for a plane ride to get some pictures, and he was turning some pretty.
Hey, Mark, the screen is frozen for us on Zoom.
It's what?
About.
The screen is frozen for those of us that are on Zoom.
Gives you an idea
Wow.
of the general area. Now, to get in there was a narrow tractor path, and Blair Pugh, who you see on the left here, our first site manager,
Could you turn the screen so that we see your screen?
some trees in preparation for the third very important gift, which was a road into the site. Bill Fitzgerald, who was a longtime member of the club, when he
How's that?
passed away, he designated $10,000 to be donated to the astronomy club. And
That's great, Mark. Leave her just like that.
money was used to pay for the road into the site. The road has been named in his honor. Once people had heard that we were building an observing site out in Ionia, we got the donation of 2 different domes. The first one was the steel dome, which is now over the Tinsley, and the second one was an aluminum dome that was donated by Lou Fico. I like cranes and enjoyed arranging for a crane to pick up Lou Fico's dome and set it on the truck that I had arranged to transport the 2 domes. Here you can see the domes have been placed on the site, and over on the right-hand side of this image, you see the 6 concrete observing pads that Blair and I poured. The 4th important gift came from Lewis Walk, which was funding to build the main education building. Here you see the foundation has been put together. And then over the next 3 weekends, our membership built this building. The first weekend, as you see here, we're working on the floor. And here's a few people taking a lunch break under the shadow of the floor. Over in the corner, you see Trudy Brown facing the camera. In this frame, you see the people over on the southeast corner of the floor. That's where the last piece of plywood was put down, and all the members that worked on the floor signed the bottom of that piece of plywood. Now, the 5th most important gift is displayed in this image. Here you see quite a crowd of members that all participated in building the floor and continued to work on this building. On the second weekend, we put up the 4 walls that define the building. Here you see work going on the north wall and being raised up into position and getting secured with bracing 2x4s and so on. In this photo, you see the south wall being fabricated in the horizontal, and once all of the plywood is put on the siding, it is raised and secured as well. Notice that all of the walls are made with 2x6. This is to allow for more insulation for the northern climate. In this scene, you can see both the north and south walls have been erected. On the third weekend, once all the walls were up, we started putting the roof trusses on top. You can see here most of the roof trusses are in place and the plywood sheeting is in front of the building. Here we have, once again, Trudy and Ken Brown still participating in this operation. Notice in the upper right-hand corner, you can see a tree that's been nailed to the highest roof truss on the building for good fortune. Getting the plywood up on the roof was a little bit of an issue, so we made a temporary platform out of plywood and 2x6s resting on my trailer. Here you see Matt Sinicola, the brave individual, handing sheets up to the people on the roof. And this is the last piece of plywood that's being nailed to the roof, which pretty much completes the wood construction of this building. Following those 3 great work weekends in the summer of 1991, 4 of us gathered to wrap the building in Tyvek and put windows in the east side of the building. You can see Chuck Spoolhoff in the white hat and red shirt assisting us from the ground, as he should be at his age. After the windows were installed, we covered all the windows with plywood to prevent vandals from breaking the windows and damaging expensive stuff. By fall, contractors had put shingles on the roof and put siding around the building, gutters and downspouts from the roof, and as you can see, the entry doors into the basement. This was only the start of the observing site in Ionia, which was made possible by 5 major gifts: the 12-inch Tinsley telescope, the land, the road, the main building, and all the involvement by the members of the astronomy club. What a tremendous change has taken place over the last 3 decades. This is a result of the tremendous efforts that have been put forth by members of the astronomy club. I hope that this will continue.
So now we'll bring you into the next. I don't think there's any lyrics there.
Mark, can you maximize the size?
Not without messing things up on this side. You guys see it?
Never mind then.
It was a tiny observatory. Awesome job.
It is such an amazing story when you see it all put together that way. That how a field in Ionia became everything we have today.
Well, welcome
Through the
everyone.
hard work of a lot of
Can you see
people.
me now, Craig? Can you see a little red? Yep. Go ahead, Carol.
I was just saying, to watch how a field became everything we have today is just an amazing story.
Yep. Awesome. Awesome. Nice job putting that together. So Carol put together the second video. Rick Albrecht did the first video. Ken?
Can I make a suggestion? Can we do that again like that in the
It's
Christmas party? Gala?
perhaps. We'll see.
We have a big video room.
Yeah. That's available on YouTube. If you go to our site, the the astronomy section of the Rochester Academy of Science, those two videos are on that site. If you want to watch them at home, you can see them on your own monitor. I know it can be a little goofy watching it virtually or otherwise. So that they are available there to see. All right. Those are the two videos. Do we need a break? No, let's keep going. If you need to go potty, go potty, but you guys at home know where your snacks are. Let me bring Dr. Richmond up here for the Mars Rover Perseverance. So let me change the share around to this. I'm sure you have that on your thing. Before I do that, let me do this. Let me pull it up here. You know how to get to your site.
Mark.
Sure. Yes. Yes. What?
Can you turn the air conditioning off a little?
Okay, is it?
Okay, no. I know that. Thank you.
You have to go to sharing stuff.
Man, your keyboard has sunken keys.
Yeah, I
What
know.
is that?
I had to replace the keys.
Use the mouse? Temperature, you mentioned it's too cold. This is a thermostat. It is pushed all the way to the maximum heat. So I'm afraid I can't make it any warmer.
Thank you.
If we all get up and run around the room several times. You don't want me to maximize it for fear of blowing?
Actually, you should be able to maximize. You just got to drag it over to that screen for some reason.
Drag it over to that screen. Okay. I understand. Drag it over to the screen. Here we go. That
The other
way?
way.
The other dragging. over.
That's you.
Okay. All right, so hello, can the people at home hear me?
Can hear you, but only see a slice of the screen.
You can hear me, but you can only see a slice of the screen. Okay, so if I don't maximize it, can you see more of it now? No? Can you see it on the screen now?
Will look to their terrorist allies to help them, but you're right, a civil war could prevent.
Only half
or limit
screen.
In the short term, the export of terrorism abroad.
By the way, we don't want to forget, we're happy that you didn't end up on the wrong flight, but we have to memorialize.
We'll close these. Mobile phone playing here.
Yeah, YouTube is still playing back.
All right, so I'm wondering if the people at home are able to see the presentation that's on our screen in the auditorium now.
We're seeing only a slice of it. For a moment earlier, though, we could see it all.
A moment earlier.
It was working fine, and then all of a sudden you sliced off about half of the left side.
Yeah. Can you see it now?
Oh,
All right, I'm going to move it.
Close the other presentation.
What about now?
No
No.
change.
No change.
It was an improvement.
That's quite a bit better.
There we go.
There we are.
perfect.
Perfect. Good. Okay.
We have ignition.
Just so you all know, you can get to all of this material by going to my website, and I would show you the URL, but you can't see it. But if you just go spiff.rit.edu/Richmond/ASRAS, you will see a list of all the presentations I've given to the group, including this one, which comes at the very end. So even if you don't see things quite properly today, you can look at them later on the web at your leisure. And if you didn't understand the URL I just gave you, send me an email and I'll be glad to give you a link. All right, so this is going to be a picture show where there's lots of pictures and not many words. that just tries to give you a flavor for the latest of the NASA Mars missions, the Mars Perseverance Rover. It was launched last year, and it landed on Mars in February of this year. And since then, it has gone through all of its checkup procedures and started its mission. So the first thing I'm going to do is just give you a brief review of how it got to Mars. So this spacecraft is unusual. The probe is much larger and heavier than most of the other probes that NASA has landed on Mars. And so it couldn't simply use a parachute the way that some of the other spacecraft have landed on Mars. And so in order to slow it down, it was so heavy, they had to use a combination of the heat shield, which slowed it down as it blasted through the Martian atmosphere. And then they did use a parachute, and that slowed it down a bit more. I guess I can make this a bit smaller. Yeah, there we go. But eventually, the parachute wasn't enough, and it would have crashed at high speed. So when they got farther down towards the surface, they actually jettisoned the parachute, and they used retro rockets. Whoops, retro rockets. The retro rockets suspended the entire unit, the payload and a rocket section above the surface, and then the rover section was lowered down while the crane section was still hovering due to its rockets. So they lowered it down gently to the surface, and then the sky crane let go of the rope and flew away and crashed to the surface something like half a kilometer away. So that's a very complicated and dangerous kind of landing. And what makes it even more nerve-wracking for the people back at JPL is that during most of this entire procedure, they can't get any signals from the spacecraft because when it was passing through the atmosphere, the ionosphere got really hot, and it prevents radio waves from getting back. So there's this blackout period of something like 7 minutes when they don't know what happened, and they just have to wait with no signal until they get back, they hope, a signal saying, yes, it's landed on the surface. Unfortunately, it worked. It's the second time that this approach has been used. Perseverance is the second the second example of Mars, of NASA's latest, most recent and largest Mars rovers. And the earlier one, Curiosity, which landed about 10 years ago, it also used the same sort of sky crane. So this is not the first or only rover on Mars. So let's do a comparison. So here we have a comparison that shows you the rough sizes of the 3 generations of mobile vehicles that NASA has placed on Mars. There are some other vehicles that have landed on Mars, but they just sit on the surface and don't move. So these are the 3 models of rovers. There's the first set of rovers, the Sojourner rovers, that landed in 1997. There was just one of those. Then in 2004, there were a pair of rovers that were later named they were named Opportunity and Spirit. And they spent quite a long time going around on the surface. And the most recent sort of rover is the sort that was Curiosity back in 2011 and Perseverance, the most recent. And for scale, there's a person. So when I think about these 3 rovers and I compare them to the size of a human being, I get a rough scale that the first one was like a Roomba, and the second one was like a go-kart, and the most recent one is basically like a small car. And the most recent one is also very much more massive. It has a mass of about 1,000 kilograms. So that's roughly a ton of material and equipment. Here is a sort of family portrait showing all 3 generations. These are sort of backups for each type that JPL kept on hand in its labs that it uses to test various procedures. So they have a big room full of sand and rocks, just like Mars, and they can give commands to the rovers And the rovers will go and carry them out inside this sort of sandbox, and they can check to see whether things go properly. So here we have the very smallest one, the Sojourner. And then here we have the middle one and the most recent type, like Perseverance, that I'll be talking about tonight. So I'd like you all to look at this picture showing the 3 generations. And I have a question for everyone in the audience and at home. And that question is, what big obvious feature of the 2 earlier generations is missing in the most recent model? Can you see something? Solar panels, that's exactly right. The solar panels that you see in the 2 smaller rovers are missing from Perseverance. Do any of you know how Perseverance gets around if it doesn't have any solar panels? Where does it derive its power? It's radioactivity. There's an RTG, radioisotope thermoelectric generator. Inside here, there's a chunk of plutonium oxide that is very warm because the plutonium is radioactively decaying. And NASA uses a thermoelectric effect. You have a warm chunk of material inside the rover and cold air outside the rover. And you can use that temperature difference to generate electricity. The chunk of plutonium should be good for another 10 or 11 or 12 years. And so if all goes well and there are no accidents, it's possible that the rover could continue to operate for quite a long time. I have a question in the room. Go ahead, question.
I wanted to point out that the RTG is the big thing hanging out back. You go back up one, you can see it really nice.
The RTG is the big thing hanging out the back.
Bigger than angle?
That thing right there.
That's
Huh?
the RTG.
Funny how they put the radioactive device at one end of this rover and all the scientific instruments at the other end of the rover.
Yeah, it's not the middle.
It reminds me a bit of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the spacecraft has the same setup. The instruments, which in this case are humans, go at one end of the spacecraft and the engine goes at the other. Thank you. So here is a picture showing the 2 Mars science laboratories. So this is the older one, Curiosity, over on the right, on the left. And here's the newer one that we'll talk about today, Perseverance, over on the right. So they are very, very similar in many ways. They both have the 6 wheels and the big arms sticking out front, and they have a mast with cameras on it. But Perseverance is slightly larger in each direction. It has more mass, and it also has slightly more instruments. Plus it has a pet that it brought with it to Mars that was not carried by the earlier mission. And I'll be talking about its helicopter a little bit at the end. We shouldn't forget that these rovers, all the ones I've showed you so far, were landed by NASA, but there is another rover currently active on Mars, which is not landed by NASA. The Chinese Space Agency has landed successfully its first craft on another planet, and it has a rover that's roughly the size of our mid-range models. And this is called, I think it's Zhuang. I can't pronounce the Chinese name properly. I can't read it, but it's a rather simpler kind of rover with not as many instruments as the one I'm going to describe tonight. But it's a very good first step. And this was their first try at landing an object on Mars. And their first try was way more successful than the first tries of the US or of the USSR. Okay, there's a note that I didn't realize until I talked it up. All of you are probably very familiar with planets that you can see in our sky right now, right? Do any of you know which planets are very well placed for observing? Jupiter and Saturn are up in relatively early in the evening. They're up in the south, very well placed. Venus, I guess, is that a morning object? Evening object. Well, Mars is not well placed. Mars is currently going behind the sun. And it turns out that when Mars goes behind the sun, we can't get radio signals between us and the planet. So Zhurong, the Chinese rover, it's going to go through about a 5 or 6 week period where it just shuts itself down and sleeps, waiting for Mars to come around from behind the sun, and then radio signals sent from Earth will come back and wake it up. The US rovers will also go to sleep. They'll also put themselves in a safe mode, but only for about 2 weeks. And I'm not exactly sure why those periods are different, because Mars and the sun are in the same place, no matter what flavor of rover you have. My guess is that NASA has stronger radio telescopes, or possibly it has better receivers on its orbiters around Mars. So it has better communication signals, and it can send a signal through the noise even when the sun is getting close to Mars. And the Chinese just have a slightly lower signal to noise ratio. So that's my guess, but I don't know for sure. And that is all going to start just in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so the biggest difference between the new Perseverance mission and all previous NASA Mars missions, the biggest single difference is that there is an overarching goal to Perseverance that was never there in any of the others. And that is that Perseverance is going to be part of a very complicated multi-step process that could, or even should, result in Martian samples of soils and rocks coming back to Earth so that scientists can actually play with them and analyze them inside their big, bulky, massive laboratories. So we should possibly be able to do a much better job of analyzing these materials than we've ever done before, because we're actually going to bring them back. So let me walk you through the procedure, because it's pretty complicated and Perseverance only has a starting role. So what happens is, first, step number 1, which should happen this year and next year, is that Perseverance is going to crawl around on the surface, and it's going to go to interesting places. It has a drill, and it can drill out samples from rocks or the soil, and then it has a set of about 40 little titanium canisters, and it can place the materials into the canisters. And here you see an artist's rendition. What it plans to do eventually, although it can carry all those canisters around, it's going to drop them either in all of them in one spot, or maybe it will place caches of them, like 6 of them here, and then drive a few miles and place another 8 of them there. And it'll put these canisters in different marked locations around on the planet, and then just leave them there on the surface. They're sealed up in airtight compartments, so their properties shouldn't change. Step 2, which doesn't happen for another 7 years, if we're lucky, is that another NASA/European Space Agency mission is going to go to Mars, and it's going to have a little tiny rover that runs around on the surface, and it's called the Fetch rover. And the Fetch rover just runs around to where these canisters are, and it picks them up. So it picks up all these canisters, or maybe it only picks up the interesting ones. And in step 3, it brings them back to the Mars Return Lander unit. So these two guys, the Fetch rover and the lander unit, they came together as part of one big mission. They landed together, and the rover sort of crawled off and ran away and picked things up. And then it comes back to the mothership, and it hands the canisters back to this lander unit. So the lander unit takes the canisters and it puts them inside itself in some safe place. That's step 3. And then in that was step 4, I guess. In step 5, which happens again in 2028 or 2029, in step 5, the landing rover shoots the samples in a small rocket, and they go up into orbit around the planet. So that's step 5. Step 6, once they reach orbit, this little rocket that carried all those samples up into Martian orbit, it sort of ejects them in a little payload sample there, and then it pushes itself, the rocket pushes itself away, so that that little tiny unit containing all the little tiny cylinders, that just continues in orbit around Mars all by itself. So that happens for a while. And then maybe a few months later, another mission. So this is the third mission. The first was Perseverance coming down and drilling and collecting things. The second mission was that combined fetch rover and lander. The third mission is an European Space Agency mission, which sends a unit that doesn't land. It just goes into orbit and it rendezvous with that little package full of cylinders. And it rendezvous with it in orbit and grabs onto it and stows it away inside its body. And then that unit returns to Earth, carrying the cylinders with it. And that takes a couple of years. So maybe it's around the year 2131 that this finally gets back to Earth orbit. 2031. Yeah, 2131. That would be a long time, wouldn't it? Sorry about that. 2031. Once it gets back to Earth orbit, of course, then there's the question of how do you get those little cylinders back down to the surface? And I believe what's supposed to happen, this spacer, of course, hasn't been built yet. It hasn't even been fully designed. But I think the idea is that it ejects the little payload and that goes down. Here it is. That little unit goes down and has a heat shield and it goes through the atmosphere and then it pops open a parachute and then it gently goes down and is picked up. So this is, as you can see, a very, very complex process, and there are a lot of steps in which something could go wrong. And if anything goes wrong in any of the steps, the whole thing probably isn't going to work. But that is the current plan. And so Perseverance has been going around and looking for places where it might start taking samples. So last month, the rover tried to, I see a hand in, is that an audience question? Go ahead, question.
Quick question. I'm wondering, does the vehicle, the space vehicle after Perseverance, do they have any other purpose other than retrieving those and bringing them back?
Is there another purpose to any of those subsequent vehicles besides getting the samples in? I do not know the answer to that. That's a very good question. I don't know whether these have been designed fully. I don't know if, I'm pretty certain they have not been funded. Right, so there's a lot of questions that could bring up. I don't know. As I say, it was just last month that Perseverance first tried drilling a sample and they successfully made a hole. And then when they lifted the drill up and looked inside, they saw it was empty. Apparently their first attempt, they picked a very soft kind of rock. And when they drilled down into it, it just pulverized the rock into a fine powder, and the powder just leaked out of the sample collecting unit. But their second try, they picked this rock, which they named Rochette, I think it was. And they said, well, maybe that's a harder material. Maybe it will stick together better when we try to drill into it. So they said, we're going to try to get a sample of this rock and put it into one of those titanium cylinders. So on August 22nd, they started the drilling operation and they made a hole in the rock. And I will show you maybe a little animation. Whoa. I have to jump ahead. 10:06 is where the part that we're interested in is.
Are you sharing this with the people at home?
Am I sharing this with people at home? I'm not, thank you. I'm going to share this with you in a moment as soon as I reset it properly. Am I sharing? I have to go to Zoom. I have to share my whole screen. Maybe I am sharing it.
It was playing fine.
I'm sharing it just fine. Thank you. Yes. Okay. So here we go. Drill the hole. Take the cylinder, bring it back into the rover, and there you go. That was it. Yes, that's very exciting. They took the rock and they put it into its little container and put that container into a little unit that carries all those little cylinders. Question? Yes.
Isn't there a good chance that those containers could be covered up by sand if there were a dust storm?
Perhaps that could happen. I don't know how quickly and how large little drifts of sand are created. Perhaps the plan is to drop them in some place where there seems to be little evidence for dunes. Perhaps the plan is to make several drops in different locations. So if one gets covered by sand, maybe the others won't. Good question. I see another question.
Yeah, so 40 does not seem like a large number of canisters. So is there a team that sits and debates amongst themselves as to whether a person is worthy of a use?
That's I don't know for sure, but I would put big money on the fact that there is a group of people who argue a lot. Now, the official mission of Perseverance is just 1 Martian year, which is about 2 Earth years. And if you had roughly 40 canisters and roughly 2 years, that's something like 2 canisters a month. And it strikes me that probably even a group of people would have trouble arguing for more than 2 weeks at a time when they knew they were going to afford it. It seems to me pretty reasonable. A few of the canisters are reserved as what are called witness samples. Some of the canisters have materials that were put into them on Earth, and they're just going to leave them alone. And when they come back to Earth, they'll be able to see if there was contamination from the environment going through the titanium or through the seals. And that would tell people, oh, these other samples that have Martian materials, they were also contaminated in some similar way. And here you can see the very first drilling here in this rock, when they looked back into the canister, little cylinder, they actually did see rock and dirt stuff right in there. So they know that this one, they got a good sample. I see another question. Oh, these canisters are something like a foot long. Yeah, I think that's about right. They don't really go drilling down. It's a relatively small unit. Okay, so that I think is the most exciting and most big important result that could come out of this mission, is bringing samples of Martian material back to Earth. Now, would that be the first time that scientists on Earth have had a chance to analyze rocks from Mars? No, people here are shaking their heads. Why not, people? Meteorites. Right, there are a number of meteorites that we're pretty darn sure came from Mars. But these would be recently taken samples that haven't gone through thousands or millions of years in space and perhaps been modified. So this would be, and also they can choose to take samples from specific geologic regions, like, oh, here's some sedimentary rock, let's take a sample. Oh, here's some igneous rock, let's take a sample. And so they can match up the materials with features on the planet, which is new and different. All right. So what I'm going to do now is just go through a series of pictures and brief descriptions of all the other instruments besides this drill that are on the rover. And if you have questions about the instruments, you can try to ask me. It's mostly going to be a picture show. So here is an overview. I'm going to talk about 7 different instruments. You can see each one of them here and their locations on the rover. Two of them are located out here at the end of the robotic arm. 3 of them sit atop this mast that runs vertically up from the center of the rover's body. And then one of them sits over here at the back below the radioactive thermal generator. And one of them sits underneath inside the body of the rover. So let's take a look at them one at a time. So the first one is called the Mastcam Z. There we go, Mastcam Z. And it is mounted on the mast, as you might imagine. And this is a dual camera. So you see 2 cameras here. Each one has a set of lenses, like 2 little telescopes, basically side by side with cameras at the end. And there's a Swiss Army knife for scale. So why would you think they'd have 2 cameras instead of 1? Exactly. With 2 cameras, they can take stereo pictures and they can get a 3-dimensional view of objects in the near field and estimate distances. So the Mast Cam Z is the one that takes the pretty pictures. So if you see pretty pictures of the Martian landscape, it was probably taken by these cameras. If you want to, if you go to the link here, there's a link underneath each of these pictures. If you click on that link, it'll take you to the original NASA site where you can get more details on the instruments. If you click on that link and you say, hey, tell me more about the Mast Cam pictures, it'll say, oh, here, if you want it, here's a panorama going all the way around, 360-degree view. And it's a wonderful picture, but it's 160 megabytes in size. And there was just no way I could get it to work on here. But you can download it yourself if you have like half an hour and then look at it. It's pretty cool. So that's up near the top of the mast. If you look below it, so here's the mast coming up from the body of the rover. And then just below it here, this set of instruments is a weather station. A weather station that measures the air pressure and temperature and humidity, the wind, and it measures properties of the dust that's flying through the Martian atmosphere. So there's a weather station. And if you want to, you can click on a link here and it will take you to the current weather on Mars. So here we go. Recently, we've had highs of about 0 Fahrenheit and lows of -100. So no snow, no snow. Right. So, whoops, I want to go back. I have to drag this out of the way. Okay. The next instrument is not really an instrument. The next instrument is called MOXIE, and MOXIE is really an engineering test bed. So if you were to eventually take humans to Mars, they would probably want to breathe oxygen. The Martian atmosphere is very thin, that's bad, and there's no oxygen in it, which is also bad. It is instead carbon dioxide. But perhaps if you had some source of energy and you had the proper equipment, you could convert carbon dioxide into oxygen plus carbon monoxide, following that thing. And so MOXIE is basically a little machine that turns carbon dioxide into oxygen and carbon monoxide. And so they have a plan like, oh, there are several different chemical pathways we could take, and there are several different ways we could make that happen. So let's put one of these possibilities into this box, take it to Mars and try it out and see how well it works and how much power it takes and what's the efficiency and blah, 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 blah. So this is just something that they're using as a test. And then, future missions might build upon the technology that was tested here. So that's MOXIE for making oxygen.
I got a question.
A question.
What kind of sample? Is it the ground of Mars? Is it like a sandy or?
Oh. This actually sucks air from the atmosphere.
I know that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about plant life. What happens if they put a plant in the ground?
Oh, what happens if I put a plant in the ground? It dies because it's too dry and too cold. I guess some people have said, what would happen if we took lichens? The lichens, the little funny algae-like substances that grow on rocks, and reindeer eat them in Finland when it gets cold. Anyway, maybe some people have said maybe you could seed Mars with lichens, and the lichens would create some oxygen. But I think that there'd be a whole lot of people who would be very angry if you started terraforming Mars without having a long discussion in the United Nations first. So it's okay if you just have this machine, because then you can just blow up this machine and then it's not ruining the Martian environment. Okay. Another instrument that sits at the back of the rover is called RIMFAX, and it is a radar unit. So it's a big metal box that shoots radio waves downwards underneath the rover into the dirt and the ground below. And some of those radio waves go down and bounce off of rocks or soil or material that's in the ground and come back up. And so it shoots down radio waves, it listens to the echoes, and it makes a map of material below the surface down to about 10 meters. And it is specially designed to use different wavelengths and look for a particular type of scatterings. If there were a chunk of water or ice or water-rich materials, this could detect it even if it's buried several meters underground. Now, out at the end of the robotic arm, there are two instruments carried, like one on the top of the arm and one on the bottom, but the arm can rotate its wrist so it can put either one on top and either one on the bottom. So the next two instruments are carried out at the end of that arm, and they can be moved around to look or sample things in a range of several feet around the rover. So the first of these two is called Pixel, and it basically just looks like a white box. That's because this instrument shoots X-rays out. So you take it and you place it down next to a rock. So you put it so that this part here is only an inch or two or less, maybe even touching some rock sample you're interested in. And it shoots X-rays out into the rock. Those X-rays excite the atoms and chemical bonds between molecules inside the rock. And then those atoms or molecules, they go into an excited state and then they de-excite and they radiate energy back. And each atom or molecule will radiate X-rays of a certain wavelength. So you excite the atoms and then you listen or look at the light that they radiate back. And that tells you something about the kinds of materials that are inside the rocks. So it's a way of determining chemical composition using X-rays. And I have a couple of pictures that just show some of the early results from this mission, where they placed it and scanned over some rock sample. And you can see that they're able to tell that this rock has some, let's see, this is like sodium, disodium oxide. So sodium oxide or silicon dioxide, or I think that's chlorine. I don't think it's chlorine. I think it is chlorine. It could be something iodide, like carbon. I don't know. Anyway, you can see for different materials, they can tell you where it is located within the sample and how much there is. So this is a good way to determine.
Pixel size? I mean, is this a pinpoint?
Yeah, these are pretty small. I don't know exactly how big, but if you just go and click on that link, it'll tell you all the details. I think it's probably roughly the size of your hand or something like that. So pretty small. So that's one of the two instruments on the robotic arm. The other instrument is Sherlock, which is one heck of an anagram for, not anagram, what is it? It's a acronym, thank you. Acronym for another kind of determining chemical characteristics. So the Sherlock doesn't use X-rays. Sherlock, here's a picture of it. Sherlock uses ultraviolet light. So it shines an ultraviolet laser at the rock sample and it excites the atoms, to lower energies than the X-rays did. And then the materials, again, after they're excited, they radiate away energy to de-excite themselves. Each material has a different specific pattern of wavelengths. And so this is another type of spectrometer that allows people to measure chemical composition. Because it uses a different energy of excitement, it's sensitive to other materials. So the X-ray gives you certain materials and this ultraviolet gives you others. Something that I think is kind of cute is that in addition to the spectrometer, Sherlock, there's a regular old camera that just takes close-up pictures. It's like a microscope, close-up pictures of tiny little grains. So it can take pictures showing details as small as 15 micrometers there, 15 micrometers. And the name they gave to the optical microscope that sits next to Sherlock is Watson. And they don't bother to even try to give it an acronym. It's just, yeah, this is Watson. So those two instruments, they can be placed next to interesting rocks or soil samples, and they tell you what that soil sample contains. And I think there's one more instrument I'm going to talk about, and it again is designed to investigate the chemical composition of some material. But this one, unlike the others, this one can actually analyze materials that can't be reached by the arm. So the arm has to bring those other two units, those other two instruments, right to the sample. SuperCam sits on top of that mast, and it has a laser which can shoot out a beam to some 5 or 10 meters and vaporize a little sample of material, tiny little pinprick of material. Poof! It heats it up, vaporizes it, and then the hot vapor emits light, again, with a specific set of wavelengths, depending upon the chemical makeup. So the laser shoots out, vaporizes the material, and then there's a special set of cameras that capture the light from that vaporized material, put it through a spectrograph, measure the wavelengths of the light, and determine the chemical makeup of the rocks. So SuperCam can reach out and investigate materials at a greater distance than the other ones. Okay. Does it have a case? A cape. SuperCam. Yeah, that's, well, let's take a look at, I guess there's a picture of it up here. Let's take a look and see if it has a cape. SuperCam is right up here and doesn't look like it. Now, to be fair, probably the makers are aware that if you did put a cape on the instrument in the very thin Martian atmosphere, it would just hang down limply. And no superhero wants to have a limp cape. It's definitely no. All right, so let me talk about the final, I think, interesting, I mean, there's lots of features, but the last one I have time to talk about is the helicopter. So Perseverance is carrying with it a tiny little, well, I say tiny little, but it actually has a wingspan, as it were, that's pretty big. It's about 1 meter wide, so that's not really tiny. And it has two pairs of blades. So there's one pair of blade, and below it, there's a second pair of blades, and they spin around real fast. Why does it have two pairs of blades instead of one? They spin in opposite directions, so you get rid of any sort of weird angular stuff. Now, basically, this is not a scientific instrument. This is another one of those engineering tests. It's the first time people have tried to fly in a craft in the atmosphere of another planet. And I think the plan was here, NASA said it'd be really useful for all kinds of scientific purposes if we could fly a helicopter. But we're not sure it's going to work. So instead of spending billions of dollars to build a giant helicopter with lots of instruments and then find out it doesn't work, we'll build a helicopter with basically no instruments just to see if it works. And if it does, then we'll make a better one next time. The only thing it carries really is a pair of cameras. And that's it. So here they are. There's the black and white navigation camera is this little guy here. And then we have the color camera, and I'll show you some examples. So here's a picture that the helicopter took while it was flying, and you can see its shadow right down there. And the color camera has both color and it has big pictures. This, I think the native picture is about 2K by 2K. So it's probably about roughly the same as maybe the cameras in your cell phone. The black and white camera, this is the full resolution. It's only 640 by 480. But this one reads out much more rapidly. They use this one for navigation. So when they're trying to see, like, where's the ground? Are we about to land? They use this camera. They use the other camera for, like, PR. And I have here a link to a video, a short video that shows the helicopter in action. So let's take a look and see if we can see that. And if you turn your sound up, you may be able to hear. I'll just listen and read the words. This is not going to win any Academy Awards. Kind of slowly developing, but I like the third act. Come on. Come on. Yeah. So this gives you an idea of how long the flight lasts. So there's a battery on board the helicopter, and it takes hours and hours and hours to charge up, and then it can power the helicopter for about 90 seconds. And then it runs out, and it has to land down, and then spend another couple of days charging itself back up. So the helicopter can only make very short hops, basically. And so it isn't being used to do what you might imagine a future helicopter. So a future helicopter might go out and scout around for miles and pick the most interesting features and figure out what's the best route to get there and watch out for rocks. And this one just goes out and takes pictures and practices. Can we land? Can we go far and land? Can we come back? Can we go in circles? Can we go up? Can we go down? So it's really, as I say, just a test bed. It has gone out on a number of flights. This table shows only 11, but it's gone out on at least one and maybe two flights since this table was made. And the total distance it's covered is almost 2 kilometers now. So I think that the scientists, well, the engineers, all of them are getting comfortable enough. They are starting to maybe use it to start scouting around and say, we think we're going to head over there. Maybe we could send the helicopter out, and maybe you could tell us whether we should go right or left of that big boulder. So I think that it's becoming successful enough. They're starting to use it in that sort of scouting manner. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this little look at the Mars Perseverance Rover mission. You can find all of this information at this URL. So some of you at home.
Data products coming in. So I think we're ready to begin processing.
Stop.
All right, telemetry should be in.
Died. Yeah, okay. Anyway, you can look this stuff up later if you want, and I have links to the Mars 2020 mission website. Of course, if you just type Mars 2020 mission into your browser, it'll take you there as well. So if you, I'm not an expert in this, I'm not actually working on it, so I can't answer your questions. So you can try asking questions for just a couple of minutes, and I'll probably fail to answer them to your satisfaction. Does anyone want to be disappointed? Yes, sir.
What is the relative atmospheric pressure on Mars?
It's roughly 0.1%. So it would be the equivalent of going up to something like 50 or 60,000 feet in the Earth's atmosphere. No, higher than that. You have to go really high. It's really, really thin.
That makes that helicopter demonstration a little more.
Absolutely, it does. Yep. I see a question in the back.
Why did they land in Jezero Crater?
Jezero Crater from orbit appears to have a break in its crater wall where it looks like a big fluid flow broke through the crater rim and went out over the landscape. And so there's very good evidence that there was flowing liquid, probably water, in the Jezero Crater long, long ago. So if you land there, maybe you can find some good sedimentary rocks where maybe you get to find life. Ha ha ha. Oh, follow-up?
There's one other reason.
What's the other reason?
3,000 people are sea level.
Meaning that
Pressure is much higher.
the atmospheric pressure is as high as you can get.
Marysville,
So it's something like the equivalent of Death Valley or the Dead Sea. Very interesting. I guess that's a place to go if you have a helicopter. Yes, question.
Is there any possibility that the energy that you're using up there can transform the surface of materials and make something new? Like,
Well-
for instance, you had a CL. You didn't know what that was. As a chemist, I think that is the chemical formula CL, which is chloride.
Mhm.
Is it possible it's made with a high energy source, reflection off the surface that transform carbon to?
So I think that the amount of radioactive high energy gammas or betas or alphas coming out of the rover is too small to do any transmutation of materials on the surface. I guess it's possible that you might make some chemical changes, so there might be a few molecules that get broken up or formed as a result of the rover riding past. But the same as happens, I would guess, if meteorites hit the surface and heat it up, and meteorites, of course, hit the surface all the time. So I don't think that this rover is going to do anything new or different to the surface.
But there might be questions in the comments.
Questions in the comments. Let's look at those. Do you know? Okay, let's see. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Carol. You can only see. Do you know what is eating away at the wheels of these rovers? Squirrels? Mice? I didn't. Something is eating away at the wheels. One thing I know is that the new rover, the Perseverance rover, it differs from its twin, the Mars Curiosity rover, in several ways. As I said, it's slightly bigger, slightly heavier, has somewhat different instruments. The wheels, the tires, as it were, are considerably different than those that were put on the Curiosity rover. The Curiosity rover got around, it's still getting around, still going around, but its wheels did have some issues with certain types of material. And so based upon that experience, when they made the new rover, they changed the design of the wheels so that it doesn't get chewed up and as badly as the first one. I don't know exactly what the details are. That's probably something you could look up, but that's a good question. All right, looks like that was all the questions. So I'm going to close it off here as it's getting kind of late and I have to go observing at the observatory and it's already dark. So I'm going to go away now. So thank you all. And
Thank you very much. Well, that's our show for tonight. I'm glad that we were able to pull this off. We have about, for those of you online, we have about 30 people in here. Looks like there's 20 some odd of you in here virtually. So that's 50 plus people. I want to thank you all for coming. We do have events coming up. Craig will save this. We'll cooperate on getting this out and probably sometime this weekend. I will post this online on our YouTube page so you can catch up with it then. And I'll also post links to Mike's site, spiff.rit.Richmond. It's pretty easy to find. I always look for his talks on there, even the old ones. I go back and look at them again, but it's available for us to look at, and his presentation. So he's got some really good ones in there. All of his presentations are good. That's it. Thanks everybody for coming. Have a great night.